what's going on, guys? This is Matt, and today we are doing a Christmas video really talking about 10 items under $100. Now, 7 of the 10 items are actually under $50, so there's really not too many expensive items in this video. I also want to mention I did make a video similar to this last year where I went over 10 items under $50. So make sure to check that video out. I will put a link in the description below. This video is really for if you're shopping for a home brewer this Christmas season, or maybe you're a home brewer yourself and you're just looking at making some small upgrades this holiday season. So hopefully these will be some good recommendations. 3 of these items are kegging related as well, so I will make sure to mention that when I'm talking about each item if it is kegging related. The first thing on my list is floating dip tubes. Now, this is one of those items that is kegging related, so if you don't have a keg, you might as well just skip this one. But for the people who do have kegs, I gotta say this is a pretty neat item, and it's under $15 from Northern Brewer. I actually recently picked up 2 of these, really mainly for my lagers, but really if you just care about clear beer in general, they're really nice to have. What they do is instead of drawing beer from the bottom of the keg where you have the sediment after it settles down after some time, you're drawing beer from the top of the keg, so you're really taking the clearest portion of the beer and drawing directly from there. So again, this is really great if you like clear beer or if you like to make lagers. They're really easy to set up and use as well, so I'd highly recommend them if you are into kegging. The next item on my list is I made this upgrade probably about 2 years ago, and this is where I swapped out all my standard PVC beer line. I swapped it to EJ Beverage Ultra Barrier beer line. Now, the EJ Beverage beer line, I actually got this recommendation from Genus Brewing, and this beer line is a lot different because it's actually been engineered to be a beer serving line instead of just being generic PVC. It's going to be BPA free, and you're not going to get any of those potential PVC or plasticky flavors from beer sitting in the lines or just the line deteriorating over time. It's going to be more expensive than just standard PVC, but this is again beer line designed for home brewers and people that serve beer. The third thing on my list is a wooden mash paddle. Now I gotta say this is probably the goofiest thing on this list, so bear with me here. You definitely don't need a wooden beer mash paddle, but they definitely do look cool. I would make a few recommendations if you are shopping for a wooden mash paddle, and that is to make sure that there is no finish on the mash paddle, and also that they are made from hardwood. They can be useful if you have larger grain bills, so if you're using like 20 plus pounds of grains to really be able to stir with 2 hands when you're doing large grain bills for mashing. Other than that, they really just look cool. The fourth thing on my list is really for people who are interested in getting into all grain brewing, or maybe they're already doing all grain brewing with brew in a bag, and that is just to get a brew bag. Now, brew bags are super cool because it is a custom made home brewing brew in a bag for all the kettles. So pretty much you can get this design directly on their website. You can put in the dimensions and the size of your kettle, and they will custom make a brew in a bag for your kettle so it would fit appropriately. It's also food safe, and you can choose micron sizes as well, so you can get a really fine mesh bag if you would like. Another nice thing about these brew in a bag bags is that they have little straps on the top where if you're using some sort of pulley, you can attach the pulley to the bag and pull it up with a winch. The fifth thing on my list is forward sealing taps. Now again, this is the third and last item on my list that is just specific to kegging, but I can't recommend forward sealing taps enough. If you just gotten into kegging, or maybe you know someone who's gotten into kegging, most likely they bought the cheap taps. And the cheap taps, they work okay if you tap them enough, but if you don't tap your beers a lot, you're definitely going to notice pretty quickly that they definitely get sticky. And what I mean by sticky is when you try to pull the tap handle, it's almost gonna feel like rusty or hard to pull, or sometimes you can't even pull it. And that's just based on the design of those cheaper taps. I would recommend a forward sealing tap. Personally for me, I have Perlick taps, and I actually have 3 Perlick taps in my basement, and I actually also got some Perlick taps for my dad as well, who just got into kegging and he noticed the sticky tap issue. There's also other manufacturers out there of forward sealing taps like Intertap, where you can change out the actual tap design, which are pretty neat, and they also come with other cool features as well. So I would definitely check out Perlick or Intertap or any forward sealing tap faucet, as it's really going to make pouring beer a lot more enjoyable. The next thing on my list is probably the most important thing on this list, and that is some sort of way or method to control your fermentation temperature. And you can do that pretty easily by getting an Inkbird temperature controller for around $25 to $35, and then just getting a heat mat, a heat wrap, a heat belt, really anything. I know Northern Brewers sells a temperature controlling kit with some sort of temperature controller, and I believe they have a heat wrap for that. But you can also use just a heat mat. For me, for the longest time when I was using plastic fermenters, I used just a heat mat. Then you would take the probe of the temperature controller. You can either tape it on the side of the plastic fermenter, or even better is you can get a thermo well, and you can actually connect that thermo well to the bung and submerge the thermo well and put the sensor from the temperature controller in the thermo well to monitor your temperature. Now, what you can do if you get these things is find a kind of somewhat cold place in your house, not too cold, but just colder, and you can put this setup in that colder space. That way the ambient cold temperature will kind of help keep things low, and also the heat mat and heat temperature controller can keep things high for you. You might ask yourself, why do you want to do temperature controlling for fermentation? And that's just because all yeasts have preferred temperatures, and if you don't ferment at the temperatures designed for that yeast, if you ferment too hot or too cold, you're going to either have a fermentation that doesn't complete, or you're going to have undesirable off flavors. That is very, very common with homebrewing, is having a few of these different off flavors, and a lot of the off flavors that homebrewers tend to battle with have to do with fermentation health, which can be avoided by getting some sort of simple and cheap temperature controlling system. The next thing on my list is a dog food storage container. Now you might be asking yourself, why would I need a dog food storage container? And really it's just a food safe container that can be airtight. You can get these as for storage for, I believe, up to 60 pounds, which is perfect because if you want to start buying your grain in bulk to save money, you can get 55-pound bags of grain and get one of these 60-pound food side containers and put that in there, and then that way you can store malt for a long period of time and for cheaper per pound as well. You can also have a place to store your specialty malt, so you can fill it up with your base malt and then bag your specialty malt and rest your specialty malt in there as well. But you can get these relatively cheap on Amazon, or if you just shop around this holiday season, you might see some food safe containers or dog food containers. As long as it's airtight and food safe, you're good to go. So we're down to the last three items. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, we are over $50 now. So if this is kind of over your price range, you can kind of skip this portion. But I'm gonna go ahead and first of all talk about an oxygen kit. Now an oxygen kit, all that I mean by that is getting some sort of oxygen tank, which you can get online, and then you can get some sort of regulator. The main reason why you'd want something like this is because all beers before fermentation need a certain level of oxygen to make sure that it's a healthy fermentation. And the only way to ensure that you get the proper amount of oxygen in your beer for fermentation is to regulate it and actually use pure oxygen. There's only around 20% of oxygen in the air around us, so when you're splashing your beer around or shaking it or stirring it up with the drill stir stick attachment, you can definitely get oxygen in the beer, but you really never know how much oxygen is in the beer when doing that. The second to last item is grain mills. Now grain mills you can actually get for relatively cheap. My grain mill was, I believe, around $90, but I think normally they're around $100. The nice thing about grain mills, and really it's super nice if you're into brew in a bag, but it's really just to be able to control the crush on your grains. And also this kind of ties back to storing your malts as well. So the dog food container note I made earlier is if you're storing uncrushed malts for a long period of time, you're gonna have to find a way to crush them as well. So this kind of goes back to that. You can also store grains for longer. The shelf life of a crushed malt is a lot shorter than just a malt that is not crushed. So you can store malts longer by owning your own grain mill. Also, if you get your grains crushed at a store or a homebrew supply or online, they usually err on the side of a larger crush for traditional 3-vessel brewing, so you're not getting a stuck sparge. For brew in a bag, you can really go very, very fine. In fact, I actually double crush my grains at credit card width, so I get a pretty fine crush, because we can, for brewing in a bag, to get a really fine crush since we're not sparging or vorlaughing like a traditional 3-vessel system. The last item on this list is a homebrew starter kit. Now the homebrew starter kit, obviously if you're already brewing, this is probably not gonna be super important to you, but this is a great gift idea if you have a friend or family member who's kind of interested in the hobby, but they don't really know what to buy in order to get started. Now, Northern Brewers sells their homebrew starter kit for $100 this holiday season, which I think is a great deal. You get everything you need to get started with homebrewing 5-gallon batches, and you also get a recipe kit online. I would recommend just one other thing along with that list, and that's just to get some Star San, some sanitizer. They only include these single packets of sanitizer, so I definitely recommend getting some Star San. And also you will need some beer bottles to actually bottle the beer, so you'll need 50 bottles of beer. So I would just recommend start drinking this holiday season and start collecting your bottles and start asking around from friends and family to give you bottles. Just make sure they're not the twist off bottles, is that they're the actual sealed bottles, because you're going to need those types of bottles for brewing on a homebrew kit. That really concludes the video about 10 items under $100. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, make sure to check out last year's video. I went over 10 items under $50. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.